So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, happy midnight, whatever time it may be, as we have a conference literally across the globe with representatives from across the globe and tackling some of these difficult challenges in our agenda. And also, very importantly, a very popular word with the World Academy is solutions. So we're looking for solutions and we welcome your participation. We welcome comments in the chat. And I also wanted to let you know that we are going to be preparing a report of the session, and we can also include additional materials and links and citations to various documentation in that report for your future reference. So my name is Dr. Isabella BUNN. I'm joining you from Oxford University, and I'm honored to be chairing this session on such an important topic regarding the universal human values and new narratives for global cooperation, which is a topic that is obviously almost a cross-cutting theme for this entire conference. And we are joined by several extraordinary experts. First, I'm going to introduce my friend Jonathan GRANOFF, who is president of the Global Security Institute, an international lawyer, and literally a tireless advocate for peace and justice and an integration of values into the global system, into the global legal affairs, and also into the global economy. So I always listen to Jonathan and I always learn so much from him, not only from his intellect, but also from his spirit, which I'm sure is also going to come across in our conversation today. And then Janani Ramanathan is known to many of you because he's the Secretary General of the World Academy. And she is always calm and always multitasking and not only doing her own work superbly, but facilitating the rest of us in getting our own work done. So I wanted to thank her because often this kind of attentiveness does not get thanked enough. I have a new friend. Judge Bahia is joining us from Brazil. I say a new friend because I wanted to be sure I had all of his designations correct. He's also a professor and an extraordinary intellect. So he is going to be making some remarkable contributions to our discussion on values and narratives. And then finally, I have Mila POPOVICH, who is interdisciplinary and I have to say intergalactic. She's everywhere all at once. And you will see that from the agenda. So she is someone that brings not just a lot of energy and intellect to the conversation, but also this assimilation of relationships, ideas, and possibilities. And she has this wonderful sort of almost sense of energy, yes, but also of impatience. She really wants to get things done. So she will not settle for having a nice report at the end of this panel. She will want to see what happened, what has changed because we had this conversation. So I honor her for that, and she's going to energize us into thinking creatively about this conversation and what happens next, because I think that is the way Mila's mind works, is what happens next. So universal human values, new narratives for global cooperations. Of course, you've read the description in our elaborate and lengthy set of panel session write-ups about the challenges of global values over time and how we are now facing some risks of erosion from, may I say, some expected forces and some unexpected forces. And how do we respond to that as a community, as scholars, as professionals, as people that care about the future of humanity? One thing that struck me when we talked about the human values and the narratives, of course, it's mentioned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a value, as a guiding force for the evolution of society. Okay, so we're talking about 1948 and the SDGs talking about 2015 Sustainable Development Goals. I think we need to remember that the development of consensus on these values in itself was a challenge. And so now we're almost revisiting a challenge on top of a challenge. And of course, the articulation of these values itself is essential. But I think the real focus here, and consistent with the Academy, we must think about actualization. How do we make this real? The words on the page. How do we implement it in a practical way in a continual process, I think, of both alignment and assessment, sort of a course correction to see if we're being successful. I think the role of multinational and national policy making is central to this, but also relevant research, including what academics produce and stakeholder engagement and at all different kinds of levels. But I just wanted to begin, perhaps, I don't want to say a pessimistic note, but a bit of a cautionary note, which is, as far as the Universal Declaration is concerned, in terms of, yes, a standard for this global sharing of values. But originally, the intention was that the Declaration would form the basis for a binding treaty on international human rights. It was going to be part of international human rights law. And what happened in the end, because of the Cold War, so again, we see how the political dynamics affect consensus and international law, two different conventions, treaties eventually developed, one focusing on economic and social rights, and one focusing on the more political, cultural, and economic rights. And so what you see is a civil and political rights, if I can just in shorthand, United States and the West, economic, social, and cultural rights supported by Russia. So there was a division almost at the outset in terms of the vision for the treaty on human rights, and this has continued to influence policies and programs and leadership on human rights in general, including within the structures of the United Nations. And we won't get into a lesson on international law, but of course, international law is subject to the consent of nation states, and many countries have acceded to one or more of these conventions. But also there is customary law, which becomes binding simply because it's so inherent in the system that must be obeyed by everyone. But I just wanted to make that point about how even at the time when it was formed and the vision for this particular declaration was not fully realized in the legal process, and that continues to this day. And also another interesting stream is the growing number of actors that are looking at the Universal Declaration and the various conventions as far as their own behavior. And I want to single out business and human rights. This has been a relatively new development, but think about mobilizing the private sector and the financial sector to support these objectives and the power that that represents and the potential transformative change that that represents. That could be a subject for an entire 3-day conference, no question about it. And also the other set of norms that was mentioned, SDG 17. The cornerstone of that process was a remarkable consultation. And it was actually a question that went out all over the world to all sorts of constituencies, all sorts of civil society groups. What kind of world do we want? And the process of those responses, literally probably hundreds of thousands from around the globe, was synthesized into the SDGs. So that represents really a wide consensus, but now we're getting a bit frustrated because we see the shortfalls on implementation. And of course, it's tied to both political will and financial resources. On top of that, we actually, as was mentioned in one of our other sessions, the United States, I should say the White House, has officially denounced the SDGs, not just withdraw support or be lukewarm, but actually denounced it. So this is another challenge that all of us have to face in our work to advance the momentum for this entire project. So I want to now turn, I think I'll begin with Jonathan and then Janani and then Judge Bahia and then Mila, and our other sort of charge, in addition to discussing these questions and identifying certain human rights for specific examination, but also this sense of forward momentum. What is the future vision for universal rights? And what is the future vision for the universal process also described in the SDGs? So Jonathan, over to you. Yes, thank you.
I think this discussion is extremely important. I think that values are what generate movement from what is to what ought to be. And since the theme is universal, I was thinking, what is the most universal articulation of our most basic human values? It's something that in every culture and every society that is sustainable is taught to all of the children in some iteration. And let me give you the iterations of that value. Hurt not others in ways you yourself would find hurtful. Buddhism. Christianity. All things whatever you would that you do to others, that you would have people do to you, do you to others. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Hinduism. This is the sum of duty. Do not unto others that which would cause you pain if done to you. Islam. No one of you is a believer until he desires for others that which he desires for himself. Jainism. In happiness and suffering, in joy and grief, we should regard all creatures as we regard our own self. Judaism. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. That is the law. All the rest is commentary. Zoroastrianism. That nature only is good when it shall not do unto another whatsoever is not good for its own self. So it's either an affirmative duty to love others and treat others as one wants to be treated, or refrain from harming others as one doesn't want to be harmed. But underlying it is the principle of equity of all lives. And you can look at families in which this principle is honored in raising children and their stability in relationships. You can look at people who violate these principles in their personal lives and you'll see that they're disturbed inside themselves. You can look at nations that treat other nations as they want to be treated. They gain respect and thus security. Because this is part of the architecture of being human. So the different iterations of it point to an underlying principle of connectedness, because it comes from the luminosity of the soul, which informs the conscience, and the conscience informs our intellects, and our intellects inform our laws and our values and our institutions. When you look at all of the conflicts in the world, all of the conflicts between people, you will always find a violation of this principle. What is striking to me in this day and age with respect to this particular principle is the failure to see a public dialogue in any of our educational institutions for international relations that nations must treat other nations as they want to be treated. It's unbelievable that you can get an international relations degree and never have any ethics in your studies, as if the behavior of nations would be different than the behavior of our own children or ourselves, as if the laws of morality, ethics, and values that bring us together as people in our families and our communities and in our nations don't apply amongst nations, as if we could be not human in our relations between nations. Very dangerous with AI, because AI is like raising a child. You can say anything to children, but they will do what you do. And AI is now being informed by the rapacious greed of the market and the fearful nationalism that's driving populism and the separations amongst people. So it's very important that we articulate a moral principle that can help build universal values right now. It is clear that the golden rule is insufficient for the 21st century. What's noteworthy is, first of all, it's stated in different cultural nuances. But more importantly, when you'll notice when it's stated, it is only as you treat your contemporaries. But today, because of science, technology, and social organization, we affect the future. We can end the future of humanity. And thus, the question is, do we or do we not have an ethical relationship to future generations? Do we have intergenerational obligations? Now, under property law, which is the main concept in which we relate to the natural world in our institutions, you can sell your property, you can rent it, you can change it, you can borrow against it, and you can destroy it. We don't have a moral, ethical right to destroy the regenerative processes of nature upon which future generations depend. We don't have a right to end the possibility of future generations, our children, their children. So I would contend that we need a universal, simple, clear, E equals MC squared, simple thing, not 17 goals, not 150 policies, but something that everybody can understand like that and take a position in it, and out of which different laws can emerge. I would say that that is the golden rule for the 21st century. We must treat the lives and well-being of future generations as we want to be treated. That could be a galvanizing principle that could give coherence to the SDGs, to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has now declared that nuclear weapons, the threat or use of nuclear weapons is a human rights violation, because it ends the possibility of future lives. So I think that, that if we could put forward a proposition like that, it is an implicit challenge to the property model that we have now. With the property model, we now are seeing, despite the fact that the law of the sea says the deep seabed is the common heritage of mankind, we see nations now vying to unilaterally license the ability to exploit the common heritage of mankind without reference to anybody else, as if nationalism, as if the nation is the ethical basis of our actions. So I think the ethical basis of our actions has to come from the conscience, which is part of our humanity, and we need to articulate a principle that is easily understandable to the public, understandable to every religion, understandable to people from a practical point of view. And I would contend that the golden rule for the 21st century would be a good place to start. Treat the lives and well-being of future generations as we want to be treated.
That's beautifully put, Jonathan. Thank you so much, because I know that you're a student of many wisdom traditions, and also your intellect allows you to synthesize them in a remarkable way. And I also liked what you said about reciprocity. Why, if reciprocity is used in so many different contexts, suddenly it's off the table in some of the largest questions that humanity is facing. So a golden rule in which we have to look to our treatment of the future. And then hopefully the future will treat us well in return. Thank you, Jonathan. And Janani, this will be a perfect time for you to come in because you also know Jonathan so well.
Thank you, Isabella. I'm so deeply engrossed in what Jonathan said. It's taking an effort to, come out of that. That was beautiful, Jonathan. During India's independence movement, we had a host of leaders, great men and women, who seemed to have extraordinary values, strengths, inner resources at their command, and they achieved at astonishingly high levels. The names of Gandhi and Nehru became world famous. There were hundreds of them nationally and tens of thousands who expressed similar values. They were operating at the regional, local levels. And this is true for every country, even if it never had to strive for independence. Whenever we look back at different times of crisis in the past, we find that a host of great men and women rose to positions of leadership and helped navigate the difficult times. We see this during war, natural disasters, the pandemic. Crisis in general seems to give rise to heroes. After the problem was solved, somehow this group gradually fades away, giving rise to another set of people, somehow not quite the same in stature. So there is something about the pressure of crisis that creates greatness in ordinary men and women, or it brings out the values that are latent in all of us. So crises generate an intense pressure that compels people, organizations, societies, nations to discard their encrusted structures, reinvent themselves, and mobilize every drop of energy to ensure survival. Oh, we are all agreed here on the need for and the power of values. So to me, the question seems to be, how do we instill values, preferably without a crisis threatening us? What can move us to greatness without the compulsion of an external challenge is a deep inspiration, something that guides or even compels us to rise higher from within. And what can generate this inspiration? Surely there are several answers to this, and one of them is the arts, narratives, stories. And by that I also mean literally literature and the stories that we tell. literature has in it the power to move, and throughout human history, it has been a companion to great movements, sometimes being that catalytic spark, like the role that Harriet Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin or David Livingstone's books played in ending slavery. The arts have kept movements alive during the periods of struggle. Some of our most moving and powerful music and poetry have been created during troubled times. So, at the Mother Service Society, which is a social science research organization in South India, to which I belong, we have used literature successfully with people of all ages, starting from primary school children. And we find that great literature is true to life. It allows us to understand situations that are otherwise foreign to us, empathize with people in all types of circumstances, and most importantly, inspire us to act. What touches our emotions has a stronger and more lasting impact. And so in this process, as we take up maybe just a story and live through all those characters, through those situations, we find that positive human inspiring values are instilled in us. So I believe that in our formal and informal ways of teaching and learning, we all could tap into the arts, integrate the scientific and objective with the artistic and subjective, so that we see the whole, the totality, the truth. And basically, all great literature, they provide unique insights into the process of evolution that governs the advance of society, the evolution of values, culture, and they offer greater depth of penetration than maybe just information or objective scientific facts, because literature the arts in general, they can portray the subjective, psychological, and social consciousness of the characters and the times with far greater depth and realism than maybe in a textbook or an academic book. So therefore, I believe that the arts can be a powerful complement to the objective analysis of external events and situations. So literature and the arts in general, they can reflect history, they entertain and educate us, but they can also shape our collective future. This discussion of values has, of course, always been important. Now, with artificial intelligence becoming a greater force, it is even more so, because access to nuclear weapons and the power to decide the course of nations has always remained with a few. But AI is easily accessible to all of us. So that makes the need to instill and nurture values in everyone more urgent and critical, to ensure that this force that AI is used as a force for good. We cannot take the AI governance and regulation separated from the rest of technology and development of all types. If we are to address this issue of the ethics of AI, say, or to go deeper, the ethics of even science, technology, and development, or at a fundamental level, the ethics of humanity itself, we would need to address the root of this issue, our human values. Legislation, standards, and governing bodies all are essential, but a values-based education that nurtures entire generations of responsible, values-based human beings is the first and most important condition. And the arts can be a powerful tool in this endeavor. Jonathan had mentioned this, something as simple as E is equal to MC square. I can think of the Russell Einstein Manifesto, which said it very simply with the words, remember your humanity, forget the rest. 70 years later, this continues to be the message that we need. Thank you.
Janani, thank you. And of course, your comments fit into this theme of what are the new narratives, and can storytelling be part of that and engage not just our intellects, but also our imaginations and the possibilities, kind of along the lines of what Jonathan talked about, a golden rule for the future, engaging the future as essentially a stakeholder in our own lives and including that as part of our obligation. So thank you so much for those observations. And now I'm going to turn to Judge Bahia.
Okay, let me share my PowerPoint. It's ready to get the PowerPoint appears to you?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, I'm an international law professor too, and I will talk about values and perspectives for the evolution of global society. And my point of view is that we can have three perspectives about universal values: a cultural universalism, a cultural relativism, or a multiculturalism. And these different perspectives can bring to us some difference, because when we imagine the idea of universalism, cultural universalism, uh, universal values, this kind of thing can bring the idea of supremacy. This kind of idea brings to us not common, but uncommon values, because external values will prevail over some values that some regions of the globe, some countries can imagine valuables. It's the idea of domination. It's the idea of one nation over another nation, nationalism. So it's the first perspective. The second one is the cultural relativism. Cultural relativism put all the values relative. So this idea or this perspective brings to us an idea of isolation, and also uncommon values, and also nationalism. And I believe that the best perspective will be the perspective of multiculturalism. This perspective, for this perspective, it's enough some core values, some common values, and with some common values that could be really core values, we can see integration, cooperation, altruism, solidarity, respect, multilateralism. And we are losing this nowadays because we can see the prevalence of the idea of cultural universalism or cultural relativism. It's very dangerous. And when you think about fair globalization, multilateralism, these first two perspectives put it absent. When you think about SDGs or Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we see this absence also when you see social tension, terrorism. The idea of universalism or relativism put it high. The religion is more excluded, not included. Nationalism is always high when you think about relativism or universalism. The perspective of multiculturalism is inverse. This perspective brings to us more multilateralism, more SDGs respect, less social tension and terrorism, more inclusion in religion. We will not see fundamentalisms and low nationalism. The nationalism is very complicated nowadays. We know that social interactions became regulated by fear of the enemy. Fear, we know, is one of the strongest force for cohesion. Fear, for instance, fear of foreign workers stealing jobs. When you see the Western speech, destruction of traditional values such as heterosexual and monogamic family, national religion, patriotism, language. When you see the pandemics, we can remember the discourse for jobs and business against the lockdown, against vaccines, against public interventions, and we experience one way to approach or to deal with the situation, minimizing risks, selling easy solutions like chloroquine. It's very complicated. Lockdown is a left-wing thing, and the individualism became more important. And it's because we have loss aversion. It's a heuristic. It's the bias of loss aversion. And for engagement, social networks uses these fears. Bubbles and clusters depend on feelings that unite individuals inside them, and the most useful is the fear. Political forces want to continue to be political forces or to take control of the political scenario. Right-wing values, individualism, nationalism, trying to annihilate all the time left-wing values, solidarity, multilateralism, cooperation, just to prevail in politics. And we can see a reckless struggle for power without a balanced thought. Because we know right values and left values must be simultaneously present. We need sometimes left values. Sometimes we need more individualism. And we cannot share the word between left and right. And this kind of polarization, nationalism is bringing that to us. And to conclude, the truth is that group identities are not natural categories, not innate, but learned. The path is common culture in some basic aspects, core values for the social coexistence is needed. It's necessary to identify the essential traits in common mankind in each of us, common and core values. I'm finishing with these four quotes. Einstein, nationalism is infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind. Montesquieu, I'm a citizen of humanity first and by necessity, and a citizen of France second, and only by accident. Albert Camus, I love my country too much to be nationalist, or Wells. Our true nationality is mankind. The logo, the former logo of the World Academy of Art and Science explains all. Unity in diversity. I believe that we need to imagine that this kind of polarization, it's our big challenge nowadays. We have to go over beyond this. And thank you, Isabella. I finish here.
Thank you so much, Judge Bahia. And you also, I think, in citing some great poetic literature, emphasize the narrative part as well, looking back at beautifully expressed thoughts, underscoring our common humanity. So I'm very grateful for that, in addition to the sharp intellectual legal mind with the analysis that you presented on the tensions of nationalism and multiculturalism. So now I'm turning to Mila for a 7-minute presentation. And please, Mila, you can refer to some of what you've heard already on the screen. And I know you had so many other sessions and engagements in recent days. It would be wonderful to get your perspective on things that perhaps we haven't seen yet or have reflected on deeply enough.
Thank you so much. I would like to take a little bit of a mathematical approach here as the intro, and then propose a narrative that I've shared earlier at other panels and that I've applied in the country of Montenegro, and I've described it earlier panels why this is an interesting, so to speak, a navel in the world. So why it is important to prototype these things exactly in this area and at this moment, at the intersection of, so to speak, to be or not to be civilizationally and planetary. Well, I would like to look at the values as property agents. That values are not, that they are expression of a property, a quality, but they're active and they're agents. And when you apply them, they create certain outcomes. So what I would like to claim here, that they have this capacity to be the transcendental equations, to be the algorithms of success. What does that mean? That means that if you want to achieve at a higher level, you have to apply higher principles. So as an algorithm of success, if you will, it would mean that a certain sequence of actions that you apply based on certain properties, qualities, that is values, that should lead to a certain desired goal. In other words, there are steps, processes, and actions that we can take and apply to accomplish what we want individually and collectively. Who knows that better than the technology that we invented ourselves? But let us bear in mind that anytime you set an algorithm into motion, there is no going back when it comes to technology. The only corrective comes actually from applying ever higher values to correct the already set in motion algorithm, to adjust it, to refine it, and that's all puns intended with that, to humanize it, to empathize a code, if you will. So in order to generate and produce higher results, we need to apply higher principles. Systems thinking and complexity theory, we have to elevate and deepen simultaneously our capacities for thinking and visioning in order to be able to access the higher level, upgrade, and evolve. So with this being said, what is the value and the quality as the qualitative agent of trust, goodness, beauty, integrity, authenticity, empathy, compassion, self-giving in the world and others? So what we accomplish with applying them, with understanding that these values are guided by a higher mathematics, they're of paradoxical nature, meaning that when you divide them, they multiply their effect. That's where the paradox is. When you share, divide, and spread love, you exponentially multiply its impact and effect. So maybe look quickly at what are some of the qualities of higher values as the ones that I numbered. I forgot to say solidarity and other things, but they are inclusive. And Saulo mentioned unity and diversity. We all refer to that you can still protect the biodiversity and cultural diversity. In fact, that's what we need to do, but unified into higher knowledge and higher principles of planetary inclusivity in empathy, solidarity, and compassion. So they're inclusive. They're integral, meaning that in approach and effect, they have the integrating capacities, qualities that are also mutually productive. Solidarity is empathy in action, for example. So they're mutually productive and mutually enforcing. They have the balancing and harmonizing power. As some of our colleagues would say, and I've heard them say in the academy, we are wired for harmonization, for sure. So when you harmonize at the higher order, you have the broadest possible impact and multiply good effects of it. And they have the exponential quality. So they're beyond the additive and cumulative, beyond divisive. They're multiplicative in exponential way and transformational. So in the era of extraordinary existential risks and extraordinary convergence of technology, our only saving grace to lead the development of our own advance is to develop the horizontal value, qualities, and properties, which is the vertical guiding system of values that expands our capacity for valence, which is applying those values expands our capacity for connectivity, for valence in chemical knowledge, means capacity to form compounds and bonds, meaning alliances, partnerships that will multiply the value of all of this. So this was an explanation to give some laws, higher laws that guide values and valence and what their properties are. What does that look like when you apply it on the ground? And if I can quickly share just a couple of slides for you and show you what we did. Are you able to see my screen?
Culture of interbeing.
That's exactly it. So I won't
couldn't have made that up, so you know that I'm looking at your slide.
Exactly. So what I'm looking at, and I'll leave it because anybody can revisit this and read it as I'm talking about. What happened here is in the country of Montenegro, that is the multi-ethnic, multi-confessional, and multicultural country, just as Saulo mentioned. We have realized, Saulo, that we have a serious problem because it's like living islands in the sea. Everybody claims their right to their own entity, but there is no true connectivity. And the patriarchal system tends to mutually strengthen them to stay in isolation. In other words, saying, I don't tell you how to raise your children or whether you will empower your women. So don't come into my yard and in my house and in my community tell me what to do. So they ended up strengthening each other's isolation. And there's a big problem if you do that in the Balkans. You're destabilizing the region, potentially Europe, and on and on. So I won't discuss that. So what we thought is that multiculturalism is our natural state. Every city, every region, we ourselves are multicultural beings, but interculturality is something else. And it's based on this unified and unifying knowledge that all life forms, beings, and phenomena are interconnected and mutually interdependent. So without reading the qualities and the implications of this culture, I will move over to quickly show another slide so for future reference we can read. It starts from, first of all, healing the biosocial conflict on which all of our systems are built, meaning that we need to apply vision and values of interculture, right? You are supposed to have the greater social cohesion as outcome, and then build models of peaceful coexistence, shared lives, solidarity, and co-responsibility for shared futures, which should lead to a new social contract that determines the value and price of everything. And in that sense, is causally linked to human security and true sustainability. In terms of coding, you will see this is, and I'll get us close to wrapping up, ethical, aesthetic, and ecological cultural code. What that means in the modern era, everything that is true, good, and beautiful that we've known all along, and that moves human spirit to actually go beyond its need to fulfill its needs and be guided by aspiration. So history is full of examples from Mandela to Malala to you name them, of beings that went beyond survival and needs to actually become exemplary in the world by being guided by higher values and aspirations. And in that sense, their legacy is immeasurable. Why is it that we celebrate them then, if the humanity is not already wired for higher aspiration? So that's what we need to tap into. And I will quickly point this out to you, that as you will see, going from the bottom up, it's almost like a chakra system, right? In colors and in connections. If you can correlate that without me extending more, expounding on this. But something that I would love to be noted here, and maybe tomorrow we'll discuss the source of this image and some of the qualities that you see here. My final claim here is that when you invoke and apply the higher values, you will have higher outcomes with greater possibility of connectivity and impact. And that is the impulse and an inherent design internal to humanity that needs to be awakened. It's in us. It's like a sleeping giant seed that needs to sprout into this flower of life.
Mila, thank you so much. Complex, intellectual, creative, all at once. And I'm sure further conversations have to be had so we can understand this better, both intellectually, but also its practical application. So thank you for taking us to a different space intellectually. One of the issues that was mentioned in the description of this this session that we're holding is about new narratives. And I just wanted to mention two sources that may also point a way forward that will be familiar to some of you. One of them comes from a professor that was at Oxford University at the Blavatnik School, Jonathan Wolfe. He has recently been appointed as the president of the Royal Institute of Philosophy here in England. And this was quite, I'd attended a conference on the nature of public policy and values, but this is a quote for him, a bit of a caution. Every question in public policy is a question that involves values. Even the decision to promote economic growth assumes that economic growth is a good thing, but that is something we shouldn't simply take for granted. When we dig a little deeper, questions about the common good, equality, and rights are everywhere. If we don't raise questions about values from the start, we may drift into ethically questionable policies without realizing until it's too late. So this is from someone who is wise intellectually and wise in terms of policy. And I think some of his observations do fit our conversation about future narratives. The other one, and I think I'm going to find Jonathan smiling at this because he's going to remember Hans Kung and his efforts from 3 decades ago for a global ethic and his institute that he founded in Germany. He was a theologian and a philosopher, and he believed that humanity needed a shared ethical foundation that transcends political boundaries, that transcends religious boundaries. He had several books, including one on global responsibility in search of a world ethic, and demonstrating, pulling those threads of both philosophy and religion to say that we have a lot to work on. They're celebrating their 30th anniversary, so I had a look to see maybe there's something upon their own reflection about their work on values from this multidisciplinary perspective. What would they say now, looking back? And this was quite interesting because they have this sense of encouragement, a guiding ethos for the future. And I will just read it to you verbatim. Social tensions and global upheavals challenges us, both as a society and as individuals, but we can only overcome them together. We are convinced the global ethic project is more relevant today than ever. Whether in schools, communities, faith groups, our work creates spaces for interreligious dialogue, values-based civic education, social cohesion. We share our expertise, enable genuine encounters, foster a culture of understanding. Because a global ethic is not an idea of the past. It is a mindset for today and a hope for tomorrow. So I think this brings together this notion of the intellectual effort that we're making through the World Academy, as well as the creative effort that we're making. And I think just as a cross-cutting ethos for the whole organization really is one of hope, one of optimism. And I think that gives us all a sense of sustenance, both intellectually and creatively. And there is Jonathan. And I see hope in huge letters. It almost looks like an eye chart at an office of a eye doctor. Can you tell us what that is, Jonathan?
Yeah, this is a book that just came out last week. It's a book with 60 authors, including the prefaces by Oscar Arias, the great visionary political leader of Costa Rica, won Nobel Prize, Jane Goodall, and I have a chapter in the book on the golden rule for the 21st century. And so it's a fantastic book. It's called
Perfect.
Hope for Life on Our Planet, Inspiration for 7 Generations. It was put together by a very wealthy Norwegian industrialist who retired and said, I want to do the rest of my life to do what's most important. And hope is the first step in creating the change that we want to see. But I would say something, Isabella, that we need to make the argument that the values that we're putting forward are realistic. They start with the truth that the human family is not based on nations or religion. It's based on our common humanity. That's the truth. Number two, it is practical. Our values are practical. They're based on what will help people. Number three, they're necessary for survival. They meet the most practical test, and that they're realistic because they're based on realism. They're based on the hard empirical science that says there's one climate, pandemics don't have passports, nuclear weapons threaten us all. We're at a moment in history where the threats that are posed to every individual can only be met based on these universal values. The other alternative is purely based on ideas of identity, nations, religions that separate us. So I would say it's based on the idolatry of our own, something that we've created, idolatry of the intellect, or idolatry of ignorance, actually. So it's worshiping a set of ideas that we've created about our identities that separate us. So there's a great Sufi aphorism that is, separate from yourself that which separates you from others.
And
Which
it's
is
so Jonathan, we did not script this. I finished I said we did not script this because I'm talking, you know, I mentioned the sense of a mindset for today is hope for tomorrow. And then Jonathan seamlessly pulls out a book with large letters of that title. So I think we have to honor that synchronicity and also the additional wisdom that you bring together in that book. And I'm going to ask this because we do have to wrap up now. Are you able to put a link to how that book, the full title, and how it can be purchased in the chat?
Yes, I'll just put the
Yes.
full title. I don't know. Yes, you can get it on Amazon. Yep.
Yes,
Yes.
the full title, because hope, I mean, we should all be searching for hope on our
Yeah.
AIs, and we'll get
Yeah.
information, but it would be nice to have that a little bit more precise. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And as Jonathan, that'll be our last act together as a group. I want to thank you for your insights and for your care and for reinforcing that linkage between values and valuable action. And we'll conclude with Jonathan's posting the title so we can write that down and look forward to further inspiration, Jonathan. Thank you.